Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where Roger and I have returned for my weekend reading report. It's time for my weekend reading report, where I talk about all the stuff that I read during the previous week. And I read some stuff. Roger and I, we got through some stuff, so what did we read last week? Well, let's find out. I will break out my list for the 500 book challenge, the challenge where I have to read 500 books that I already own before I'll buy any new ones. And I'm not going to be buying any new ones for a while. So where did we leave off? Let's see. It was book 162. Book 162, which was The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So I love this book. This book is fantastic. And I read this for Rocket Summer, the fantastic reading event that's going on all the month of July, where we read vintage science fiction, classic science fiction. And this last week was the 1950s, and this was a 1950s book, The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And I loved it. And I did a whole video about it. And in case you missed it, I will link it down below in the description box. So yeah, if you want to see me talk about this book for like 15 minutes or whatever it was, I'll link the video. But I really liked it. The ending, not so much. The ending, not so much. The film did improve the ending. But actually, both films improved the ending. There were a couple of films that were good, and a couple of films I don't remember too much. But the 1950s one, excellent. 1970s one, excellent. And this is an excellent book, which you should read if you like the movies. You should check out the original book. It's awesome. So the Invasion of the Body Snatchers was book 162. Book 163 was this book, Batman Year 2, which I also did a video about this week. Not my favorite Batman story in the world, and certainly a pretty big letdown after Batman Year 1, which was fantastic. Batman Year 1 by Frank Miller. You should read that. Don't bother with this one so much, unless you're just a huge Batman fan. But yeah, I talked all about it in last week's Epic Comic Book Wednesday, so I won't yammer on about that anymore. Which brings us to book 164. 164, which was Ring Around the Sun by Clifford D. Simak. Ring Around the Sun. This was also, I also read this for Rocket Summer for the 1950s. This book from Clifford D. Simak was written in, copyright 1952 and 1953. So 1952, the early 50s. This book I really, really enjoyed. So Clifford D. Simak did write my favorite science fiction book of all time, which was City. I loved City, and you should definitely check that book out. But I had never read this one, Ring Around the Sun. Actually, most Clifford D. Simak books I haven't read, which, considering how much I enjoyed City, kind of surprises me when I think about it. But I finally read this one, and I really, really enjoyed it. This book is really interesting because there's so much stuff in it, so many ideas in this book. We've got parallel worlds. We've got robots. We've got androids. We have mutants. The mutants are hunted and feared by humanity. I have a suspicion that Stan Lee might have read this book at some point. Because the idea that the mutants in this book, they're not quite X-Men, but they do have mental abilities far beyond regular human beings. And they see the way the world is going, and they want to save humanity from themselves. And the way they try to do this is really interesting. But they are feared by regular human beings. and mutants are hunted down in this book. And it's an interesting book. And it has a lot of the concerns of the 1950s. So this book is very much of its time. Takes place in the future, but it's very much a future that is still the 1950s, basically, with a lot of 1950s concerns. Really enjoyed it. It's paced very well, and the main character is really interesting. You really want to find out what happens. This is one of those books where you just want to see how it all turns out. There are moments in this book where it gets kind of bogged down with either philosophy or exposition, but never too much. Never too much. It tends to move pretty well. And it certainly maintains your interest. Really interesting book. So yeah, Ring Around the Sun. I definitely recommend this book if you've never read it. It's a science fiction classic for sure. Loved it. So yeah, Ring Around the Sun. You should read this book. It's awesome. So I read that. That was book 164. 165 was Thor, Hell on Earth. So this is the 22nd epic collection that collects the Thor comic book. And I am reading all of Thor, the first volume of Thor, the first run of Thor, which ran from the early 1960s up until 1996. And this has stories from 94 to 95, so almost the end of Thor. The weird 1990s, and that 1990s were a very strange time for Thor. This volume, this epic collection, is much better than the one I read last week. Almost all the stories in here were written by Roy Thomas. Roy Thomas is a pretty good comic book writer, and he had a run on Thor before in the 1970s that was really very interesting. These issues are not so interesting. And yeah, Thor was just in a weird place in the 90s at this point. Thor has this ridiculous outfit, not my favorite. He's hanging out with this really lame group called the God Pack, and they're all a bunch of losers. They all seem like he's hanging out with this group of superheroes that I feel like were kind of inspired by some of the superheroes that were done by Image Comics at the time. Image Comics was very popular at the moment, or that moment in the 90s. But they were pretty lame, and Thor was kind of lame. And I even Roy Thomas couldn't really save the Thor comic book. But this is certainly better than the stuff that came before. A lot of the artwork was done. Who is the artist at this time? I'm forgetting his name. Let me not forget his name. And now I can't find it. It was MC Wyman. MC Wyman did a lot of the artwork at the time. And he's pretty... He has kind of a very typical 90s style, but not a particularly great 90s style. So it's okay. It's just like, it was all right. But the last issue in this epic collection was pretty fantastic. So this comic book closes out with an issue where Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz returned to Thor. Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz had a great run, so they returned to write a Thor story. And the artwork is by John Buscema. So John Buscema returns to Thor, and he's fantastic. So we get this one great issue at the end of the epic collection where John Buscema returns. And Frenz and DeFalco return to this comic book for one issue because it's basically about how Eric Masterson, who had taken over the role of Thor for a while and then became the superhero Thunderstrike, has died. Eric Masterson has died. And he was one of Thor's best friends, so Thor has to deal with that. And it's just a really great issue. So this ended well, and John Buscema, of course, is fantastic. He couldn't make this costume look better than it is. I mean, he did his best. It's a great issue, but Thor's still in that lame outfit. What do you do? And the 90s don't get any better for Thor as regards clothing. You know, he should have just gone back to his regular outfit, but he didn't. Oh well, so that was book 165. What am I reading right now? The Green Brain by Frank Herbert. I'm continuing on with Rocket Summer, and we've got The Green Brain, which I just started, and it seems really weird, as you would expect from Frank Herbert. This came out in 1966, I believe. Yeah, 1966 this came out. I can't remember when Dune came out. I think it was around that same time, right? Early 60s, mid 60s. But The Green Brain, much thinner than Dune. And I haven't gotten very far in it so far. I should have this wrapped up in a couple days, though. It's not too long. But really weird. It has something to do with insects. Super intelligent insects. I think it has something to do with that. But like I said, I haven't got far enough to tell. This is another one of those Frank Herbert stories where he just drops you right in the middle of things, and you have to figure out what's going on kind of on the run. That's how he writes science fiction, which is good. Keeps you thinking. Frank Herbert, The Green Brain. I'll let you know how this is. I'll let you know how this is next week. Also, what I'm reading right now, is this. Thor World Engine. So I am at the end. I'm at the very end of Thor. So I'm almost finished with this. I'll be finished with this today because there's only one more issue of Thor. This is the end of Thor, issue 502. This was the last issue of the first run of Thor. And Thor did not come back in his own comic book until I think it was 1998. So he came back in his own comic book in the whole Heroes Return thing in 1998. But this was the end of the first volume of Thor. And there's Thor's... I told you Thor's outfits did not get any better in the 90s. You can see it there for yourself. But yeah, I'm going to be reading this today. The very last issue of Thor. And then I'm done. And then I'm done with Thor. I've been reading Thor since last October. And so it's strange. I've been reading Thor every day pretty much. And now it's over. Now it's about to be over. I'm going to be moving on to the Fantastic Four. But I will really miss this series and these characters because this was overall pretty fantastic. I'll talk all about Thor and my feelings about the first run of Thor on Wednesday for Epic Comic Book Wednesday. But yeah, I can't believe I'm here at the end of Thor, the very end of Thor. But I am. I finally made it almost. So there's that. I did get a couple things in the mail. The Robert E. Howard Foundation Press sent me this book. I was really surprised because I was not expecting to get anything else. They sent me a bunch of books not too long ago, which I made a video about, the Robert E. Howard Foundation Press. But they also just now, out of the blue, sent me this one as well. So thanks, guys. That's wonderful. I really appreciate that. They said, yeah, we're going to send you another book. Here it is. So this is the collected letters of Robert E. Howard, Volume 2, his letters from 1930 to 1932. And in the note that came with this, it said that some of his most interesting letters are in this particular volume. So yeah, I really look forward to reading this. I love Robert E. Howard, my favorite writer of all time. And the Robert E. Howard Foundation Press is awesome. And they have a lot of great books, which you can buy right now, including this one. And so you should go and buy this book and all their books, because like I said, they're awesome. And they publish a bunch of stuff that are not in the fantastic Del Rey set of Robert E. Howard. So if you're a Robert E. Howard fan, yeah, check them out. So yeah, thanks guys. I really appreciate that. That's amazing. Also, one other thing I got in the mail this week from Jim from the fantastic channel Mystery and Mayhem, he took pity on me and sent me this book. This is Conan, City of the Dead. This is the Conan book by John C. Hawking. So John C. Hawking wrote a book that came out in the 90s called Conan and the Emerald Lotus, which I had back in the 90s. I think it was the late 90s, if I'm remembering right, but I could be wrong. But I do remember it had a Ken Kelly cover, and I remember it being pretty good. Not all of the Thor pastiche Conan books from that time were good, but that one I remember being pretty good. And he also wrote a sequel called Conan and the Living Plague, which is included in this book. So both of those books are included in this volume. So there's 2 novels in Conan, City of the Dead. And Jim, thank you very, very much for sending that to me. Sending this to me. You didn't need to do that, but I'm glad you did, because I really want to read this book. So yeah, Conan, City of the Dead. This is available now from Titan Books. They're the ones that have the license to Conan nowadays, and they're doing a fantastic Conan comic book, which I'm going to be doing a video on the first year of the Conan series, the new Conan series that should be coming out soon, probably either tomorrow or Tuesday. Looking more like Tuesday at this point, but yeah, I'll have that out soon. But yeah, thanks, man, for sending this to me. That's really awesome. Conan, City of the Dead. And I think that's everything for this week. I think that's everything. I will shut up now. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.